Hey, what's going on, everyone? BlueandGold.com's Mike Singer here. We had a technical issue in the first 10 and a half minutes of our post-game show with Mike Goolsby following Notre Dame's win over Georgia Tech, so we had to cut that out. But next is the rest of the show. So cut out the first 10 and a half minutes that had the issues. We apologize about that, but go ahead now and listen to the rest of the show. Now, Notre Dame fans, we are back with our flash sale, ND 12 for 1. That gets you a year's worth subscription to blueandgold.com. All of our premium access, you can get that for just $1 a month. So that comes out, for you mathematicians, yes, $12 a year. Now, Mike, my next question for you is, I guess it's not even so much a question as a comment, but so you have Clemson against Boston College ekes out a game where they're down 18 at home. And then Notre Dame, this game was 18-point win. That's pretty comfortable. But the Louisville game, which is an ugly 5-point win. Is Notre Dame the only team that doesn't or is not allowed to have one of those close, ugly wins? It's like I feel like with some Notre Dame fans, every time Notre Dame has one of those games, it's the end of the world. But other schools are just kind of allowed to have that.
Well, it's interesting. So I guess my answer would be sort of twofold, Mike, in that we're not on the Clemson message boards. So you don't know if the world's ending over on their end based off of the way they played against BC. And they, and Syracuse gave them a game the week prior. But yeah, I think the reason that it's just people love to hate is, again, such a strong word, but like people love to beat up on Notre Dame just for what it is. I think the tradition, yeah, we could do a separate pod on some of those theories, and then the other thing, maybe that people don't come down as hard on a Clemson or on a Ohio State or an Alabama or whatever, if they have some of these close games, was because it's been widely accepted that like a Clemson has a surplus of talent, as does an Ohio State, as does an Alabama, where they kind of get a pass because you're like, they just played like crap this week, but they've got all these talented baller first round draft picks. Where I don't think that's Notre Dame shares that. Has that same sentiment when people think about Notre Dame. They don't think elite athletes. That's why it's a little bit more critical. I just think that maybe those upper echelon, higher tier teams like Clemson, they get a pass sometimes for poor performance just because, well, shoot, it's Clemson. They still got a bunch of dogs. That's just my thought.
So one thing we definitely wanted to see from this team today was some big plays defensively. Have the stats up on defense for our YouTube audience. Kyle Hamilton, 5 tackles, couple TFLs. Dalen Hayes had 5 total tackles, 2 TFLs, a couple forced fumbles. He had his best game this season. Total, you had 5 sacks. Hayes' 2 forced fumbles, the only one in that category. Couple pass breakups. So, one of Hayes, I think it was his first sack and forced fumble. That came after Georgia Tech had that really long completion downfield, Mike. So well timed as well. So let's talk about the turnovers, the pass rush. Anyone really flash on defense that you want to give more love to?
Your edge guys primarily, and they weren't even really throwing any moves. So just put a pin in this, Mike, that next week against Clemson, try and make this as salient of a thought as I can. I hope to see Hayes and Foskey in number 91. They're going to work some upfield inside moves, like you're talking about a spin move inside, club moves inside, because everything that we got, all the success that we had today rushing the passer, sacks, fumbles, was getting around the edges, kind of running the rails, like I kind of teach kids where they sort of dip and kind of run that rail. And Clemson's going to see that on film, so they're going to be prepared for that. Maybe overset a little bit as far as their tackles. So you might see a little bit more inside moves next. Keep an eye on watching the game. But yeah, it was something that we needed to have. because you talk about Clemson's athletes where they probably have a little bit more speed outside than we do to cover them, right? I mean, with the exception of maybe Hamilton, maybe they just have a half a step on some of our guys. So an equalizer, and I think going back to some of these games running on the as far as the pass rush is concerned, this kid playing for Clemson, I caught a little bit of that game. He's not the athlete Trevor Lawrence is, so that escapability isn't as much of a concern in terms of him getting outside of the pocket. It's not going to strike fear into you the way I mean, maybe making contact with him is he's 250 pounds, but it should give our edge guys a little bit more freedom to be a little bit more creative and jump inside if need be.
Let's pull up the offensive stats. Ian Book, 18 of 26, 199 yards and a touchdown. Javon McKinley, the leading receiver for the Irish, 5 receptions, 93 yards. And rushing, Kyren Williams, 15 attempts, 76 yards and a pair of scores. Sibo Flemster, 15 carries, 58 yards and a touchdown. And then the last guy we're going to mention here, Chris Tyree, 5 carries, 47 yards. Mike, that was a guy we talked about last week, and I want to say even the week before, who was not getting super involved in the offense, being true freshman running back Chris Tyree. So limited action, but what'd you think about him today, Mike?
Well, we've been talking about it here on this post-game pod is if and when, and it shouldn't be if, but when Tyree learns to just tempo his runs a little bit and just let that blocking develop just a hair longer, watch out. And you saw it today. He had a huge chunk run, and that's what he brings, whereas I'd love to see a little bit more of them as their opponents. It's probably true that Tyree doesn't have the level of trust built up with the coaching staff that a Kyren does or even a Sibo does at this point. But a young player like that, it's like how else is he going to get the trust or gain the trust? Practice is one thing, but giving him some live action in the game. It's almost like, I'm in sales for a living, Mike, and any good sales job out there, you need multiple years of sales experience. Well, how the hell am I supposed to get sales experience as a younger person, without, you got to find the experience somewhere. So I'd love to see him. I mean, the yards per carry is there, the explosiveness is there, and it'll be interesting. I mean, I would assume when these coaches are breaking down the film and game planning for Clemson, it has Kyren lost a bit of trust, Mike? Yeah, I don't know. But I do think I'd love to see more Tyree in some form or fashion, whether it be returning punts or something, a kid that explosive. I'd love to see more of them. But you saw probably one of his best runs of the season today.
Now, Mike, it seems like each week there's like a new guy at receiver. Last week it was Skoranek. He only had the 2 catches, but 107 yards and a couple of scores. It's Ben McKinley who's the top guy. Sometimes it's the tight end. Today, again, it was Javon McKinley, 5 receptions, 93 yards, and he had that long of 34, and he caught 100% of his targets as well. So it's a group we've talked about a ton, Mike, is this receiving core. How do you feel about them going into the Clemson game?
I don't know if I have any feelings. I wish we had a guy, or I wish we had 2 guys. I don't know. I still contend that based off of just the eyeball test and just watching the kids move around, that Avery Davis seems to be or have the highest ceiling, Mike. That's what I would say. I mean, Skoranek and McKinley are more of a finished product at this point. You kind of know what you have with them, but there is probably that trust factor there with the coaching staff. But yeah, I wish we had more than one guy that would flash. Wilkins played okay today, had a big drop, but yeah, if they're just going to roll guys through, so be it. But there's plenty of plays And I'll go back and rewatch it, but there's plays where in the kind of that long red zone, 25, 30-yard line going in, and you can clearly see, clear as day, Skoronek's got one-on-one coverage. Safety's not even anywhere close. No help over the top. And I wish we could spot like the corner's technique is that the corner's just stopping him from running an inside route. So what that told me, just looking at the play, is that corner has been coached. They're not afraid of a deep ball to Skowronek in that scenario, like as if they don't think that Book could, that either he can get open deep, or that Book can make that type of throw. So the corner was sitting on anything inside with no help deep. That was just interesting to look at. So who's that guy that can create the one-on-one separation? We still haven't found it yet, and as evidenced by this one clip. And near the end of the game there, again, I think it was late third quarter, we don't have a guy that I think outside scares anybody, and I wish we did.
Mike, I think we've is there much more to discuss about the Georgia Tech game, or should we just go ahead and get into Clemson?
Let me just look through some notes here. No. Let's talk Clemson.
All right, Mike. So
we should probably do one of these midweek too, or get on there with Lou or Pat or somebody, and do kind of an appetizer midweek. But anyways, let's go.
I guess the first question is one that we could spend a whole hour on alone, is what will we see? And we touched on this earlier. I'm guessing a lot of ground and pound, play action, use the tight ends, feed up, get the clock going in Notre Dame's favor, time of possession, keep the ball away from Clemson, and kind of win one of those 20-17 games. Mike, is that kind of what we're thinking of the game plan is going to be for for the Irish?
Yeah, who knows? We do so much speculating on here, but if I were calling plays or if I was working on a game plan, please, more inside runs and outside runs, please. And the logic behind that is you take away or negate some of that team speed from Clemson, and that those guys, you're doing them a favor by letting them fly to the ball outside. But to make them stand up and get into a fist fight, and we'll take 3, 4, 6 yards a pop, inside runs, please. And I think you have to work the middle of the field, because Coach Venables over there, like, he loves to blitz his linebackers. Hell, the one linebacker is his son, number 15. But they love to do a lot of crossing, blitzes, etc. So that middle of that field should be open for Book. So shore up your protection, your inside pass protection, and we'll hopefully sprinkle some balls in the middle of the defense as far as the passing game. And then if you have the opportunity, take a shot. Boston College had a guy get loose on a long ball today, and the ball was just slightly, I think it was actually overthrown, but he had a guy that left their corner, which was nice to see. So, they bleed too, right? So that's going to be the scheme, hopefully offensively. And then defensively, like you saw today, where Dalen Hayes was crashing down on some of those quarterback to side plays. I've heard them called RPOs, quarterback reads, quarterback to sides, where he's riding that running back's belly. And then this kid that we're going to see next week, this bigger, younger quarterback, again, not going to try and pronounce the last name. We're not worried about Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is faster than most of our linebackers, probably not Koromoa. So he's as much of a threat running the ball as is Etienne. So if you can sort of eliminate that threat of the quarterback pulling it, so we can just focus more of our the stopping of the run on the back, as opposed to the dual threat of the quarterback pulling it and running it. So, and that kid can throw the ball, don't get me wrong, but Etienne's got to be the focus. We saw in the Louisville game, it was Drew White gave up a wheel route. And they caught the ball on the 2-3 yard line. We saw today, Bo Bauer give up a passing back, similar type scenario. So you're going to see a lot of that with Etienne. Etienne, to me, is like Alvin Kamara a poor man's Alvin Kamara right now, and he's not about to be poor for long with the draft. But that's like very preliminary sort of game plan thoughts for me, Mike.
Couple comments in the YouTube live chat here. Joseph Barrett asks, Mike, how do you envision Notre Dame defending Travis Etienne? And then Notre Dame Dude 88 says the matchup between Etienne and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is going to be awesome. So, Mike, tell us about, I mean, obviously, you played for the Fighting Irish as a linebacker. You've been pretty critical, rightfully so. I mean, look, you know the linebacker position just as well as anybody. So just thinking about that Clemson rushing attack versus Notre Dame's defensive line and linebackers, how you feeling about that one?
I feel better. I feel better knowing that Lawrence isn't going to play than I would have if he was on the field, right? So that's maybe the most generic statement I've ever made. But the reason why is so when they're riding that halfback, now our linebackers can just fill the gaps almost willy-nilly, just clog everything up because we're not worried about the quarterback pulling it. And that was like my fear. Like I feel like our linebackers don't have great instincts. Like that much is blatantly apparent. It's painfully obvious. They don't make a lot of tackles. Like they don't like, it's like, do you want to make a damn tackle? It's crazy to me. They don't have like the innate ability to find air and find room to wiggle into a gap. Like, so against Clemson, I had to settle myself down, Mike. Against Clemson, they can slide into their gaps, fill hard downhill, and then your defensive end's going to have to handle the quarterback, period. Or so Koramoah is going to come off the edge and clean him up. I think that the linebackers can, and if Trevor Lawrence was in the game, our linebackers, due to lack of instincts, are going to kind of be in limbo. They're going to have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Do I come downhill and fill this A gap? But what if Trevor Lawrence, where this upcoming week, you should eliminate any of that sort of doubtfulness to just run in there and stick your head in there. Because I don't see this quarterback that we're about to play beating us on the ground. He'll get his own. He'll get some, but it's not going to be. I don't presume it's going to break our backs, I guess. Much more aggressive, and then that's against the run. And then in terms of the passing game is concerned, as far as the passing game is concerned, if the front four tested out first quarter, if the front four is making some hay and showing some glimpses that we can get to this quarterback, he's not going to go through his reads quite as quick. He's going to hold the ball a half a second longer, one would assume. So we can just flood the zones where you don't have to be blitzing your linebackers, because we blitz them anyways, and they never get home anyways. I mean, they don't. So you might as well let them float around and try and clog up those lanes and have the quarterback hold the ball. So I mean, that would be my approach. And I feel confident saying that too, Mike, because we saw it today. Our front four got home. So it's just, it's a nice luxury to have. You don't have to blitz your inside guys.
Oh, man. Can we talk about Kyle Hamilton enough? 6 tackles today, a couple TFLs, pass breakup. I mean, he's just so freaking good, Mike. How would you use Kyle Hamilton against Clemson? And just, I mean, it's obvious how good he is, but is there anything that he does that might even fly under the radar?
I think, let's try and say this the right way. I think a lot of what Kyle Hamilton does, it's not that it doesn't fly under the radar, Mike, so much, but it might be taken for granted. That dude makes so many plays and cleans up so many people's mistakes or lack of effort or lack of execution, and just like it's over. He does it all the time, and I think we as fans and just observers like sort of take it for granted, like, oh, like no, that was an amazing play. So what do you do with him? Just play center field and trust his instincts, or maybe there's some of these scenarios where it's a third and critical type down and distance, and maybe you can put him on whoever you deem as their top threat. Maybe an even with an Etienne. Like, I'm sure Lee can work out some sort of scenario where if they move Etienne out to run a route, or if they leak him out on some of these wheel routes, which we will see. Promise you, we'll see it, because we've been beat on it 2 weeks in a row. Maybe you, and I'm just off the top of my head, Mike, but maybe the linebacker runs a delayed blitz because he knows that Hamilton's going to pick him up in coverage. So they sort of read that on the fly. I don't know. But he's a tremendous, tremendous player. I think he'll be an all-timer at Notre Dame. And he's my team MVP thus far this season. And I think you recruit kids like Kyle Hamilton to shine in these games like we're going to be playing next week. And I feel good about the likelihood that that'll happen. Yeah.
All right, you mentioned the team MVP. A little comment there, Mike. I texted you during the game and said, you know what? If we have some time during the live show, let's kind of give some mid-season superlatives, if you will. So the 4 categories are MVP, biggest surprise, most improved, which those two kind of can go hand in hand, and then biggest disappointment. You go ahead first, Mike, and then I'll follow.
Let's get a little bit of discourse here, Mike. So I just said Hamilton's my MVP.
Yeah. So Hamilton's a really good choice. I'm going to go with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I mean, even with this guy's numbers that he's putting up, I still feel like he does so much more than even the stat book shows with just how rangy he is. I mean, he's like Kyle Hamilton, but at linebacker. It's like if you have Kyle Hamilton beefed up and was a rover, like it's Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. They're just such rangy, big time players. So I just think that Owusu-Koramoah, what he does for the linebacking core, it's 1A, 1B kind of deal with Hamilton and Owusu. So if you went Hamilton, I'll go Koramoah.
Yeah, and I think the theme with both of those players is they make plays. And we saw some plays made from our front four. But throughout the previous games this season, those are the only 2 guys you're like, damn, where they flash. And I mean, Koramoah missed a huge hit today, and that would have been on SportsCenter. He came down and filled. But yeah, they take their shots. And that, I think that their ability to pull the trigger, take that shot, it speaks to their level of confidence, in their abilities and knowing their responsibilities, so they can kind of gamble a little bit. And that's what great players will do. So yeah, 2 good votes there. So what do you want to do next? Biggest surprise?
Yeah, my biggest surprise is Kyren Williams, because going
over here.
I am Captain Obvious, Mike. Going into the season, it was just you had at running back, you had Jafar Armstrong, Sebo Flemister, Jameer Smith, who has since left the team. You just didn't know, and I think it's a pretty good surprise that your 2 best backs are your 2 youngest backs. That's not good for the older guys, but Jafar Armstrong, who I mentioned, he was playing at receiver today, a little bit in there, so he's made that move over. It seems so. Yeah, biggest surprise for me. Yeah, Kyren Williams didn't see this good. Like he was the X factor going into the season at running back. You didn't know what you had, but you knew he was really good. And yeah, he's really good.
So I'm working towards something here. So what would you say is what makes Kyren so special? And just football wise, is it like, I would say it's a little bit of that contact balance. Contact balance, he could take a hit, keep his feet. He runs hard. But that cost him today, trying to pick up a couple extra 1-2 yards and caught the ball up. We got it ripped out. What do you think makes him so unique, talented, special?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is reliability, although that wasn't the case today on that one play. But otherwise, he's just been someone that stick the ball in his belly and he's going to go get you yards. He's not the biggest guy. I want to say he's even an inch shorter than Chris Tyree. So, I mean, look, this guy's about 5'8", 5'9". He's not the biggest, but he's just a grinder. He's not the fastest. He's not the biggest, but he just makes things happen, and he's just a lot of fun. That 1-2 punch with him and Tyree is, man.
And this isn't huge fan of Kyren, but I just wonder. It's fun to question, and I'm not. Don't interpret this as a negative about Kyren whatsoever. But if you gave Tyree, 70% of Kyren's workload, so that Tyree's getting 17 carries a game, 10, call it 10 to 15, 17, 18 touches a game. I wonder what he would do with this offensive line. Because you have to obviously factor that into Kyren's success too, the line he's running the ball behind. So, I'm still a huge Tyree fan. But yeah, Kyren is an obvious biggest surprise. I'm going to go ahead and say, since you took that one, Mike, I'm going to say Nick McLeod has been a pleasant surprise for me. Much better than I thought he would. I'm very, very pleased at how he's played and the energy that he's brought, I think, to the defense. But Michael Mayer's been a surprise too. I mean, in talking to Coach McNulty in the offseason, like, okay, we're assuming that, well, there's a high probability that Tremble's going to leave after this year. So it's like, okay, you expect him to be the number one receiving threat from the tight end position, and then a true freshman who looks like a 24-year-old grown man out there is balling. So he's my biggest surprise thus far. Absolutely.
Notre Dame fans, make sure you use promo code ND12for1. Go to blueandgold.com, click the subscribe button, and then enter in that promo code. If you have any questions, you can email me personally, msinger@blueandgold.com. Couple more, Mike. Most improved, biggest disappointment. Let's get through these real quickly so we can get to our questions from our blueandgold.com premium message board as well as the YouTube live chat. For me, Mike, most improved is a guy who, pull up his numbers today, talking about Avery Davis, 4 receptions, 29 yards on 5 targets. So not the sexiest stats, but he's just someone who he's bounced around. He came in as a quarterback, and then he was moved. He's been all over, corner, receiver, running back. He's been everywhere. And I think, honestly, Mike, he's got for me, the trajectory of a potential NFL guy with, like, he just looks the part as a big time slot receiver. And then my biggest disappointment, another kind of easy one, is just the passing offense. There's been some bright spots, but just not a ton of consistency. And you would certainly hope to see more explosiveness in the passing game from a third year starting quarterback. And look, I understand though the weapons at receiver aren't great, but if you have the best offensive line in the country, then you should be able to stand in there longer and find some guys.
Yeah, it's hard to call the passing offense, which is a polite way of saying the book's been a disappointment, Mike. But I think it's like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Like, so in that, and I'm as guilty as anybody. But yeah, I mean, Book is who he is at this point. So it's hard to label him kind of a disappointment, just because I don't think that he's been what we all want him to be, and he continues to not be that. So but my biggest disappointment is the linebacker play. It's like, it could be due to the rotation and like the lack of sort of rhythm and game flow for some of those kids. But yeah, I don't see it there outside of Koromoa. And I called Maris the liability, and he got kicked out of a game today. And say what you want, man, but like, you're going to miss him for half of the game against the best team in the country. That's a liability. And then biggest improvement, I was going to put somebody else in there, but coming off of today's performance, I'll just put the front four in general. And Dalen Hayes, team captain, kind of leading the tip of the spear there. So that's my vote for most improvement. So
going back to the Book thing, it's part of that, Mike, but also we've talked a lot about the receivers not getting all the separation and just general, yeah, like fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. I totally get it. It's like, look, guys, no, we know who Ian Book is. If you thought he was going to go from junior year book to now Trevor Lawrence level, then that's not Ian's fault. That's on you for expecting that. But still, just a little bit of disappointment. There. Question from our blueandgold.com message board. If you're listening on,
You squirm a little bit, Mike. You know that?
squirm. What are you talking about? Me squirming? All right, question from our message board. Braden MI says, has Reese been holding back on his playbook ahead of the Clemson game? That's something we touched on not only tonight, but really in weeks past as well, that you've kind of felt that might be the case. So any extra thoughts there, Mike?
No, I think I would think that's totally reasonable to believe. And because, I think those coaches just assumed we were going to win. They didn't care if we won ugly, as is the case with Louisville. A win's a win's a win. So, I think that was pretty apparent. And I know we had a question last week about the screen game. When are we going to roll out the screen game? We saw that sprinkled in a little bit. So it's exciting for us because we've seen, again, outside runs, inside runs. We've seen Book out of the pocket. We've seen a little bit of screen game. We saw back shoulder fade today. It's like, wow, welcome to big time football. So that was exciting to see. So we can't create separation deep. Logical move is to throw a back shoulder fade. So I haven't seen Coach Reese's playbook, but at this point it should be fully installed. And now it's just a matter of, like we talked about, Mike, who's going to be the 1 or 2, 3 guys that we lean on to play outside and go catch balls.
Another question here. RRH1 from our blueandgold.com message board says, why can't Notre Dame move the ball late in these games? Notre Dame's, maybe looking to add an extra touchdown for Vegas purposes. Notre Dame fans might want, the Irish to cover the spread there. So, does that concern you at all that, look, Notre Dame's got a comfortable lead. They're just kind of running out the clock, and then, they're not having a ton of success. Any comments here, Mike?
We saw last week. It looked like we started pulling starters early in the fourth quarter. So that's kind of your explanation there. This week we left them in. Maybe somebody was looking to cover the spread, but hey, fool me once, shame on me, or shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So if you'd taken the under at 58.5, you're like some of us on this pod may have done, you're tickled pink right now. So you just got to watch and learn.
Question from Han from our blueandgold.com message board. Should the Irish focus on Etienne and force the freshman quarterback DJ Uiagalelei to beat us?
Yes, absolutely. And Etienne, like I said, when you look at the body type and you look at the biomechanics, the way he moves and looks like Alvin Kamara, and they use him as such. So yes, that's an obvious, resounding yes. I'm not worried about this kid, the new quarterback replacing Trevor, about him beating us on the ground. And it's like, we've all been watching Bill Belichick coach games for years and years and years and years, and he takes away something. And then it's from that point, it's kind of a bend don't break mentality. So it's like, let's force this kid. So we're going to play some one-on-one, and we're going to force this kid to drop some dimes. But we're going to clog the box, and we're going to stop Etienne. I'm not as concerned with Etienne as a traditional between the tackles, old school running back in this game. I'm much more concerned about them creating mismatches with Drew White or Bo Bauer or any of these guys trying to cover him. That's going to be a nightmare. So we'll have to get creative in terms of how we use Maya and use Kyle Hamilton, in my opinion, to track him as he moves around the field and trying to gate some of those mismatches. But he should absolutely 100% be the focus point this week.
On our YouTube chat, KMA Preston says Ian Book has been sacked 8 times in the last 3 games. Do you see that as an issue going forward?
That's yeah. The generic answer is yes, but without just copy, it's really tough to give you a confident, definitive answer. It's a great question though, and it's good observation. But would we? My I guess my answer to that question may be another question, Mike. In that, would we rather have Book eat the ball and take a sack, or would we have him try and force it into coverage so we can't see if these guys are open or not? But like I talked about this the previous 2 games, that Haynes, he had his hands full, and he's going to have his hands full next week. So some of those sacks aren't all on Book. I mean, we saw a play today where I'll never understand it, Mike, when offensive coordinators draw plays up like this, where they in pass protection, they'll put a tight end on a defensive end, and it literally never works. I think it's Brock Wright just whiffed, didn't even kick slide, just whiffed, and there's just instant sack. I don't put that on Book. I put that on the scheme. And I don't really even blame Brock Wright for trying to do that or giving up a sack. So it's definitely something to shore up, but I would rather take a sack than a turnover. How's that?
One more thing from me, Mike, before we sign off here again. Everyone, use promo code ND12 for 1. Check out our site. Go to blueandgold.com. Subscribe and use that promo code to get a year's worth of access for just $12. That is savings of $87.
Corner, co-workers, family, sign them up.
Absolutely, Mike. Use that promo code, everybody, and try us out. See what you want. It's not a huge investment for you. Last question, Mike. Quick score prediction. I'm putting you on the spot here. This is not something we had talked about. Give me a score prediction for Notre Dame Clemson. The line, I want to say right now, is probably around 2 touchdowns or so. Maybe with Lawrence out, it goes down to 10. But I think it was Mark Sanchez on the halftime show said that even without Lawrence, Clemson's going to roll Notre Dame. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds like something Mark Sanchez would say. Doesn't it? Let's give me a second here, Mike.
You're all
right. You love Colin Cowherd, and Colin Cowherd talks about this often in terms of how many points is a player worth, right? And that he'll say, Tom Brady is worth like to Vegas. Tom Brady's worth like 2 points, and I think, and I forget there's only been a handful of players that are worth like more than 3 points. So if you kind of take that analogy, and I'm reiterating what I heard on Cowherd's show. So if Trevor Lawrence is out of the game, what would Vegas say he's worth? College football, 6 points? You would think it'd be higher, but I'm just going off of what Cowherd said previously, that Tom Brady's like worth 2 or 3 points to Vegas. So with that, I would say a score prediction. I love that question. Should have saw that coming. Like 20, 28, 24, something like that.
Do you have a victor?
I think Notre Dame wins. I do. Yeah, I think 28-24 could be something. Yeah, something like that. And we touched on this a couple weeks ago, Mike, like the craziness that is the world right now. And then you kind of localize that or focus that in on the college football world and how we're like missing games and this and that. Like, I was like, if there was ever a year Notre Dame could make a run at it, it's this year. So even if we beat, I'm already thinking about the championship. But when I got that news that Trevor Lawrence was out, like my mood lifted because I did not feel the same. He's the number 1 pick in the draft. So you eliminate that. We don't turn the ball over in the game, which we don't really do. We've been playing great defense against horrible teams. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I definitely like our odds. And yeah, I like my prediction too. The other thing too, and I'm saying this as like an ex-player, in a game like this, they're going to be a little bit tight and we're going to be a little bit tight. It's just we're going to feel each other out for a little bit, and then that brings the total points down. Wink, there's so like the first quarter and a half is going to be kind of be a throwaway. It's a heavyweight boxing match, people feeling out their reach. So yeah, I don't see a ton of points being scored, and then maybe just a little bit of a flurry there in the fourth quarter. So yeah, but I absolutely like our odds, and I have to pick Notre Dame. Get real.
I'm just the host, so I'm not making a pick, Mike. Sorry about that. I'll do that later in the week. That's good.
I knew you wouldn't. I didn't even ask.
That's going to do it for our post-game show. I'm Mike Singer. He's Mike Goolsby. Appreciate it, everybody. Again, use promo code ND12 for 1. It's going to be a late kick next week, 7:30 on NBC. But if Goolsby's going to be here, I'm going to be here as well. We're going to have a live show.
Let's do it. I'll be there. Let's do it, man. Hey, and that's the thing, though, Mike. If we're going to be there, listeners, subscribers should be there as well. I mean, what the heck, right?
So join us.
Yeah.
Join us on the post-game live show. We'll do it again 15 or 20 minutes after the conclusion of the Notre Dame Clemson game. Appreciate it, everybody. Have a safe Saturday night and happy Halloween.